And away we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. I, for myself, am in Georgia, so it is afternoon for me as we get ready to dive into Coffee Talk. And that is, of course, Coffee Talk Live or at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube, if you're looking for me there, as well as Prepper University on YouTube, or at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, and fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. You can catch me there as well. And for those of you who can see, there is Miss Kitty. Probably haven't seen her for a while. There's Miss Kitty. People ask about her from time to time. One of our earliest adoptions. Not suitable for other people because of how skittish and easily frightened she is. So we just keep her, and she's fine. As we get ready again to dive into what's going on in the world today, some things you may know about and some things maybe you have not heard, some things flying under the radar, because I do like to pick up on those when I can. For those of you who are listening and not watching, of course, I will try to read through as many of the comments as I can on the live portion that takes place on YouTube prior to being podcast on Fistful of Radio. And I'll go ahead and acknowledge some of the people who are joining us so far who have chimed in on the chat portion. I see Helter, Delo, Dragon, Urban Angst. He's got his Christmas trees up, I see. Rodney from New Zealand. Hope things that are going well. I hope they're going well too. Actually, they may be going pretty badly. Bingo is here. Bulldozer from Colorado. Delo again. Delo, you chimed in twice. Donna Beaver says he's from extreme North Georgia mountains. Good place to hide out. And Armored Ghost. Hump Day Coffee Talk. Oh, Miss Kitty, you taking off? We just got started. Oh, well, there she goes, folks. The chair's open if anybody else wants to come and sit here now. Anyways, and Boogers is here as we get ready to pop into some of the things that are going on in the news, in the world today. Now, one of the things that comes up a lot, of course, you know, I do a lot of stuff on Prepper University, the Prepper channel, not crazy doomsday prepper kind of like weird stuff that you saw on the show that made preppers look like a bunch of morons, but just practical, realistic things that I throw out for people to talk about. Now, people are always, or have been off and on over the last couple of years. Do you think we're going to have to go to war with China? Do you think we're going to go to war with Russia? Things like this, because you see things in the news, and the news tells you things to kind of scare you and to light a fire under you and make you nervous and make you paranoid. The media does it on purpose. The government does it on purpose. Now, China has said and done a lot of things the last couple of decades, literally, that are extremely annoying and that have made people get nervous. Like, wow, it looks like it could really happen. You know what I mean? That sort of a thing. They're like, oh, you know, are we going to end up in a war with China? Are we going to end up in a war with China? Which, quite frankly, two superpowers, two huge countries like that fighting a ground war just isn't practical in today's day and age. But there we go. I see Monkey has joined us as well. Bulldozer says Biden taking over airports for 60,000 migrants. Yeah, coming from, he's trying to get some of those Afghanis that are getting thrown out of Pakistan. Actually, I heard. Monkey says his state passed abortion rights issues and the recreational marijuana. Wow. And Armored wants to know if Nikki Haley is worse than Biden. Remains to be seen. But anyways, talking about the wars and rumors of wars coming up about China and all the things that happen with China, all the way up to their showboating with their Navy and flybys and all that other garbage that they do to cause problems and to stir up mess. You can kind of pass it off as China being China, but they did something this week that it's subtle, really subtle, but something like this coming from that type of society who likes to embarrass an enemy, this is a red flag. And I'm going to show you here in a moment. And Fluke Man is here. He just joined us today. Here it comes. I'll pull the story up. Merv John says, good show. Love it. Oklahoma staying alert. It's here. Glad you could join us today, Merv. Here's the story, and you may not have seen this. And this particular article is from USA Today. I just grab a random article and talk about it, waiting for it to pop up. Monkey says China isn't something to worry about military-wise since Mao Zedong. Each premier kept saying they'll take Taiwan and still haven't since. Yeah, they've been talking about that for more than 50 years. Are you ready for it? Pandas are leaving the National Zoo in D.C., heading back to China on Wednesday. And it's not just the National Zoo. It's all of them. China, even the ones born here, they're on lease. And China just allows zoos under Nixon, because this goes all the way back to Nixon, allows for zoos in the United States to host the pandas. Now they said they want them all back. The pandas at the Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington, D.C. are leaving the U.S. today and heading back to China, the zoo confirmed to multiple media outlets. USA Today is providing live coverage of the pandas' departure, which will begin at 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time. You can watch at the video at the top of the page, blah, blah, blah. After spending 23 years in the U.S., the pandas Mei Zhang and Tian and Zhao Kuiji will begin their long journey back to China on Wednesday, marking the end of the animals' decades-long tenure in the country. The pandas will be moved via forklifts on FedEx trucks, blah, 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 and they explain how they're going to fly them. And their estimated departure from the airport to fly back to China is around 1 p.m. DC's pandas departures come after zoos in Memphis and San Diego have already returned their pandas, and the Atlanta Zoo pandas Yao Lu and Zai Lun will be going back in the beginning of 2024, according to news releases. China has recalled, or they have closed the door on allowing for U.S. states or U.S. zoos to host their pandas, which is the national animal, which is not that well protected in China since they kill them to eat their paws to get bigger erections. I kid you not. Crazy stuff. But that type of slap in the face move is a bigger prelude to something nasty coming than anything China's done to the U.S. since the U.S. conflict with North Korea in the 50s. And Bob is here. Bob's joining us. Monkey says, and also their weapons are tofu degu conditions, a.k.a. breaks very easy after firing one shot. And Armored says, China is far more peaceful than America. And goes on to say, doubt China will physically conquer Taiwan. They're more likely to subvert it. And Arakel is here. Arakel has joined us this afternoon. This is a bigger news story than anything they've done, up to and including ramming ships, which we talked about a couple of weeks back over in the Philippines. This is remember, analogical thought process society. This is a slap in the face to the United States. That's their intention with that type of thing. So I just thought I would throw that one out there. I see Gary Smith has joined us today as well. Rodney says, one comment I've heard about the situation with China is that one-day freight will stop coming. They'll still accept payment for orders, though. Yeah, they're not very well liked globally, including by the United States. And quite frankly, we never should have allowed ourselves to be that codependent on another country for manufacturing in the first place. What, you coming up here? Okay. Miss Kitty, get comfortable. Wants to sit in my lap. Hello, dear. How are you today? There she is. Miss Kitty, everybody. And then there's Uncle. Uncle was probably bothering her, and that's why she wants to sit in my lap now. 20 pounds of tuxedo cat there. Okay, that's enough of cats. That's enough. That'll help with the algorithm as we continue on. Cut that out. Uncle. All right. Scratching the carpet. Now, an extension on something we talked about yesterday. Coming up here. And Sven says our manufacturing was stripped away with the support of unions grossly enough. And then Urban says China's quest for male potency could be partially responsible for certain species of animals on the endangered list. Yeah, it is, because they'll ground up and they'll put anything in a tea to see if it'll have a reaction. It's weird. They're very weird with that. And then Gary Smith says there's never enough cats. Yeah, I know it. Well, there's 2 in the room right now. And 500 Magnum has joined us. Glad you could make it. Now, we talked about this person yesterday. That's Victoria Ruiz. And Gary Edwards is here. Everybody's popping in. Gary Smith and Gary Edwards. Now, the New York City public defender, Victoria Ruiz, we talked about her yesterday, that she was tearing down posters of kidnapped victims in the Gaza Strip. And she was caught. Somebody caught her they filmed her on their phone and they threw it out there for everybody. And the office of the New York City public defender basically had her apologize and promise that she wouldn't do it again. And that was enough. But public pressure has now pushed her into a position by which she has resigned. She has left her post. A couple more comments here. We'll get into the article. Armored Ghost says, hard to see American manufacturing returning. Millennials and Zoomers don't want dirty jobs. No, they don't. Mike Rowe said so. Remember that show, Dirty Jobs? He can't stand the direction that the American workforce has gone in. And Merv says China can cut us off from goods that we need. Well, we should be making it ourselves anyway, or making better bedfellows. And Bernab Sanchez says, good afternoon. He's joining us here today. Fluke says, Kat, accurately understand you when you tell them not to do something. Can you ask them to get you a cup of coffee? I'd like to see that. Yeah, they'll stop. Or if they're facing off, I've noticed that too. If they're getting into a fight or they look like they're going to fight and I tell them to back off, they'll separate or things like that, or get down from that chair, things like that. They respond to a point. I don't think I'll get a cup of coffee out of them though. Armin says, why make things for your country when you can do a funky dance on TikTok instead and still silly people just give you money? I need silly people to give me money. Maybe I should dance on TikTok. And then Johnny is here. He says, driving while listening. Glad you can make it, Johnny. But back to the New York public defender. She got a slap on the wrist. It wasn't enough for New York. New York City just wanted her to publicly apologize or write an apology. And she's been pushed to the point where she's resigned now. It says New York County public defender who was caught brazenly tearing down posters of hostages missing in the Israeli-Hamas war has resigned from her position. A representative said Tuesday. Victoria Ruiz, 36. She's only 36? Oh, man, she looked like she's in her 50s. Decided to leave the New York City Council Defender Services after she was captured in a viral video last week, ripping down one of the many posters plastered across the Big Apple since the terrorist organization attacked Israel on October 7th. And I thought this had a video. Oh, it does. I think this is actually, if I can get it to work, the video clip. There she goes.
Why are you taking down pictures of missing children? Why are you taking down pictures of missing children?
That was the clip. I'm sure you heard that. But and good. You know, if the people don't like that, if people don't like her, don't trust her, are ashamed of her, or disappointed in her, they should push until she leaves. You know what I mean? And Bernie, is it Bernie? He says accountability, but not for me. Urban says she should have immediately resigned without the pressure. Tearing down hostage posters is about as low as it gets. And they were posters of children, I'm hearing now. Helter says she can't even apologize. She still doesn't think she did anything wrong. Still lies She still lies that the posters justified anything other than calling for the release of kidnapped children. Fluke Man says, how America going to manufacture anything without increasing the costs? And Dragon says, Ruiz is a prisoner of twisted ideology in which calling attention to Jewish suffering needs to be shut down because it detracts from her narrative. And then the Warden has joined us today. Glad you could make it, Warden. And I wanted to put that story up real quick because we talked about her just yesterday. Hey, sit down. Sorry. Miss Kitty and Uncle don't really like each other, so I have to watch out. I have to watch out for that as we move along here. And speaking of silencing people, I mean, she's not a big politician. She's small fish. Here's a bigger one that's also been silenced, and this is big news. Washington Post: House votes to censor Representative Rashida Tlaib over comments about Israel. Now, I don't know if I've ever heard about in my lifetime a politician in Congress having to be put to a vote to make them shut up because they're so embarrassing. This woman right here. The makeup's not helping you, sweetie. She looks terrible. But it says right here, House on Tuesday voted to censor Representative Rashida Tlaib, who is the Democrat of Michigan, pushing the only Palestinian American member of Congress over her comments related to Israel's war with Hamas. In a 234 to 188 vote late Tuesday night, the House passed a censor resolution put forward by Representative Richard McCormick, who accused Tlaib of promoting false narratives, which is true, apparently, regarding the Hamas attacks on Israel in October and for calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. 22 Democrats voted for the censor, while 4 Republicans voted against it. It was the second time in 2 weeks Tlaib had faced an effort to censor her. This time the resolution was prompted by a video Tlaib posted to social media last week accusing President Biden of supporting the genocide of Palestinians and calling on him to support a ceasefire or risk losing her support in 2024. The video included footage of a crowd chanting the phrase "from the river to the sea," which has often been interpreted as a call for the eradication of Israel. Believe me, it is. Tlaib defended her use of the phrase as an aspirational call for freedom, human rights, and peaceful coexistence, and refused to retract it. Now, the woman, and I'm sorry, she's a moron. I know she claims to be Palestinian. She is not. She is not, because she would know better otherwise. This is the woman who, we talked about her like a few weeks back, has in front of her office a Palestinian flag adjacent to a pride flag. That's oil and water. If she was really Palestinian, she would know better, because that could not possibly be tolerated. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. If Hamas or any of those extremist Muslim groups took over the United States tomorrow, she would be the first one to get burned at the stake. They would hate her more than anybody else. She's basically, that's her playing both ends. I'm trying to pander to the young hip crowd by waving the rainbow flag, but at the same time, oh yeah, Palestine. It doesn't work like that, sweetheart. Not in the real world. It's incredible. Gary says slave labor trumps underpaid labor. Again, talking about China there. Helter says members of Congress who have been censored are required to give up any committee chairs they hold. Like a reprimand, a censor does not remove a member from their office, so they retain their title. Urban says Rashida is wearing a terry scarf around her neck in Parliament. Wow. And Dragon says there's no legal consequences that come with a reprimand or censor. In other words, the GOP wagged their fingers at her and scolded her. It's still embarrassing, which I think is what the point is. Yeah, I know. And it's like getting impeached. It's like, who cares? Who gives a damn about getting impeached? And South Florida is here. He says, good afternoon. Glad you could make it today. As we take a look at Rashid, and hopefully that will be a wake-up call for the people that vote for this woman and other people like her, that she needs to take a walk. That she needs to take a walk. Does she truly represent the needs and wants of the American people? I have no idea. I doubt it. I very seriously doubt it. You got to wonder how people like this get elected in the first place, how that works. This is why a lot of people strongly suspect that there could be fraud in the elections. Do you think it's possible? And Paul DiMartino has joined us. He said, "Staying frosty, looking forward to the show every day." I'm glad to hear him. Glad you get something out of it. And was it Bernie? We're calling you Bernie. He says, "Is that kind of like Elizabeth Warren claiming to be Native American?" I guess so, because if she was truly so-called Palestinian, she wouldn't dare have a rainbow flag. That's the kind of thing they'll kill you for over there. Monkey says if she's in a Muslim majority district in Michigan, then she'll be voted in again, possibly. And Gary says, "I'm wagging my finger at Tlaib." Oh, shame, shame. But yeah, and again, she could be voted in again. It could end up being like in New Jersey. Take a look at this from New Jersey. This will stir your pot. Washington Examiner. New Jersey elections, the assembly remains blue in Democratic clean sweep. Every Democrat won everything in New Jersey. Funny how that works. Are the laws in New Jersey working for the people there? But this is what happens. Democrats held on to the New Jersey General Assembly early Wednesday morning, sealing a clean sweep of both chambers after fending off a spirited Republican challenge. New Jersey's Democratic Party capitalized on the topic of abortion access to combat motivating issues for Republicans, such as the economy and parental rights. So apparently, being able to have retroactively birth control your child is more important than the cost of living or parental rights. That's great. And they win based on that? I don't know. It says all 120 seats in New Jersey state legislature, both in the General Assembly and the state Senate, were up for election on Tuesday. Several subjects leveraged by either party made for close battles across the state in an 80-person assembly. New Jersey, while not a traditionally progressive state, has consistently voted blue in recent years, and while voters may not lean to the left across every topic, they are predominantly pro-abortion rights. With just over 1 year since the overturn of Roe versus Wade, pollsters and Democrats in the state insisted that it was very much on voters' minds. On the other hand, the topics of parental rights and how to handle transgender issues in the classroom made their way to New Jersey prior to the election. Apparently, what they would have us believe is that voters don't care about that. Parents across the state rallied around those subjects, and the activism was not limited to Republicans. In an October poll from Farley Dickinson University, the majority of New Jersey residents, 52%, said that parents should have some control over what's taught in schools. And I don't trust polls anyways, but some control. You should have complete control over what goes on in your schools because your kids are being brainwashed. Unbelievable. So they got a clean sweep in the New Jersey elections. I wonder how that happens. I wonder how that works. Maybe it works like this. Here's a story that's flying under the radar, and this comes from the Associated Press. As I wait for it to pop up here. Surveillance video prompts Connecticut election officials to investigate Bridgeport primary. Why are they doing that? Surveillance video of a woman making multiple early morning trips to stuff papers into an absentee ballot Dropbox promoted Connecticut election officials to open an investigation Wednesday into possible fraud in the mayoral primary in Bridgeport, the state's largest city. The videos taken by city-owned security cameras were made public this week by Bridgeport's former chief administrative officer, John Gomes, days after he lost the Democratic primary to incumbent Mayor Joe Gainham. The original recordings have not been released by the city, but excerpts posted by the Gomes campaign purport to show a woman visiting a drop box outside Bridgeport City Hall Annex 3 times between 5:42 a.m. and 6:38 a.m. on September 5th and stuffing documents inside. The video also shows the same woman inside City Hall Annex handing papers to a man who then deposits them in the absentee ballot box just before 7:20 a.m. Under Connecticut law, people using a collection box to vote by absentee ballot must drop off their completed ballots themselves or designated certain family members, police, local election officials, or a caregiver to do it for them. Ballot stuffing in the mayor election. And they want us to trust voting. That's what they want. Monkey says if it's not a main presidential election, people tend not to vote in on it. This giving stuff like abortion rights being passed like here in Ohio. And Gary says all states are pre-selected as either red or blue in order to give them the false impression of political party nationwide, which makes it easier to fool conservatives into accepting close defeats. And you'll notice also, I've noticed it here in Georgia quite a bit in recent years, that when you get to the big elections like senator seats, governor seats, things like that, that the election is always super freaking close all of a sudden. It's like 51-49 by the time they're done. And it's really suspicious to me. Urban says, I wonder how many such video clips exist that are being suppressed. Who knows? Who knows how many or how often? But that makes you wonder how safe it is, how often it happens. But you can't talk about it. You can't talk about it. This guy could get in trouble for talking about this, for trying to call attention to it. They've opened up an investigation, sure. But if they don't find anything in the investigation, is he going to end up like Trump for saying that he thought it was stolen? In his opinion, something was wrong. And now they're dragging him in and out of court. I don't see Stacey Abrams getting dragged in and out of court. She claims that she was cheated out of the gubernatorial seat in Georgia twice. I won. She'll tell you tomorrow. Why isn't she being prosecuted? Why isn't she indicted? What are you going to do? The warden says apparently there's a chemical plant fire here in Texas. What kind of chemicals? Helter says 1 vote, 1 day, voter ID required. It's the only way to secure elections. You hope. And Gary says they want us to know the election fraud is occurring because it gives us a false impression that the elections are worth cheating over. Well, no, I don't know if I agree with that. I would say that it gives the impression that if there is fraud, that they are willing to do something about it. That if there is fraud, that they are willing to do something about it. I think that's why they do that. What's wrong, Miss Kitty? You're back in here again. Is he bothering you? And oddly enough, there's a similar story in Pennsylvania. And this comes from Newsweek. Pennsylvania voting machines changing votes sparked outrage. Look at this. Here we go again. An error. Not that somebody programmed it that way, but an error with voting machines in Pennsylvania causing votes to change amid an output print error is sparking outrage online Tuesday. They said error twice in the same sentence. Officials, that's bad syntax. You shouldn't do that. I know I'm getting anal about the about the way they structure the sentences again. Officials with the Northampton County Elections Office released a statement Tuesday saying that it appears when voters select yes or no for one of the candidates for Pennsylvania's Superior Court, the vote is recorded for the other candidate. Funny how that works. The issue is limited to the retention of Pennsylvania's Superior Court, affecting Judge Jack Pennella and Judge Victor P. Stable, county officials said. According to the Associated Press, Northampton County Executive Lamont McClure said voters first noticed the error on the printed voting records produced by the touchscreen machines. In the release on Tuesday, officials said that the Elections Division of the County of Northampton notified all poll workers by text message that they are to instruct voters before the voter enters the voting booth that there is an issue with the recording of their vote for the candidates for retention to the Pennsylvania Superior Court. In response to news of the error, Congressman Brian Donalds, a Florida Republican, took to X, formerly known as Twitter, saying, "This is why Americans have a growing distrust of the system. It baffles me how Democrats consistently screw up the execution of elections to the peril and misfortune of the voter, make elections safe and secure again." Have they ever been safe or secure? Have they ever been safe and secure? Because I always think about, when I see an election, I think of Gangs of New York, and when they got all the guys off the docks coming off the ships and had them vote, and then gave them all a free shave and a haircut, and had them go vote again. That's how I think of. Paul says, "I unfortunately live in New Jersey. This place is nothing but corrupt. It's more like the People's Republic of New Jersey. Youch." And the warden says they make solvents for glue and paint remover. Also, that's going to be a really toxic smoke then. Urban says it's not a glitch, it's a feature. Yeah, no kidding. And Monkey says third choice, yesn't. Yeah, yesn't. Spectre says, "Never got the notification. How long you been on?" We've been on for over half an hour now. And I set these up early. I usually set these up like around 7 in the morning, sometimes 8 o'clock if I'm running late. So yeah, you should have long since gotten a notification, but that doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. Gary says, "In professional wrestling, the bad guy uses the chair behind the referee's back, which provokes outrage and gets the audience invested in the outcome. Same thing with election fraud. It's a kayfabe." And Dragon says, "There's a reason why many technologically advanced nations, and of these nations, they get the highest scores on fairness of elections and how well organized elections are, still use paper ballots." And many of you already know my story about the voting machines in Boston in the mid-90s. I've told that story a few times on this channel, where I was working for a Christie's Market. I was their closer, and an unmarked white van pulled up to our dumpster and started dumping things in our dumpster. And when that happens, I'm supposed to make a police report. I'll tell the story again for those of you who haven't heard it. I'm supposed to make a police report, and I believe it was a mayoral election at the time. It was for the mayor's seat. And I couldn't get out there because there was too many people in the store. I was there by myself to go and confront them or anything like that. But it was guys in suits, and they were throwing stuff in our dumpster. And when they left and I went out and looked in the dumpster, it was full of voting machines. And this is late at night. And I went and I called the police. I made the police report, and he was like, "Well, they threw voting machines in your dumpster? Are you serious?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's full of voting machines. There's a ton of them in there. It's full." "Okay, I'm going to get an officer out there." And I waited and I waited and I waited. Police never came. BFI came. And BFI is the dumpster company. And they emptied our dumpster in the middle of the damn night. It was probably like 11:30, midnight, something like that. They dumped our dumpster. When have you ever seen a garbage truck after 5 p.m.? And the police never showed up. And I told the manager in the morning, and he was like, "Yeah, you're lucky they didn't throw you in the dumpster too and take you away." So I've always suspected there was fraud. Bingo says there's hundreds of videos and accounts of election fraud last night in Pennsylvania, not only changing numbers, but adding them, and polls being closed early, then opening later. It's crazy. And Sven says, "Purple dye on your thumbs." Yeah, there you go. And Dilo says, "I'm up at 4 a.m. waiting to listen to your live." Really? I'm glad somebody's paying attention. I try. But this is how you do it, folks. This next one, and I'm sure they don't want to showcase this one because it'll give too many other cities and states ideas. And this is in Michigan. Okay, this is how you do it. News Nation, look for this story. Michigan town votes to oust their entire government over Chinese factory plans. They voted out everyone who was sitting on the council and everywhere else. They got rid of the entire governing body in their town because they voted to do something the town didn't want, which often happens. You hear this all the time. City councils, or especially, and I hate them, parent-teacher conferences, when you go up there and you air your grievances to the school board and they ignore you. And they give you your 3 minutes, and when the timer's up, if you don't shut up, the sheriff drags you out. It's an absolute abomination. These people do it right. A rural Michigan town voted to oust its entire local government Tuesday after the town board approved a Chinese-affiliated electric battery plant. Residents of Green Charter Township, Michigan, strongly disapproved of the local township board's decision to greenlight construction of a Chinese-connected electric vehicle battery plant in their community. The project was expected to create more than 2,300 jobs as part of a $2.34 billion investment. However, it's the possible communist connection that so many Green Charter Township residents said drove them to the polls and fueled the town's anger. The Chinese-affiliated company Goshen previously denied allegiance to the Communist Party of China. However, its corporate records say the company shall set up a party organization and carry out party activities in accordance with the construction of the Communist Party of China. So they lied. And so did the town council. Right now, we are not on friendly terms with China. They are threatening us. I consider them the enemy. I don't want them here either, resident Harry King said. With the overwhelming distrust for the town's government, a clerk from a neighboring township ran the election and counted the ballots. It says cheers erupted as voters heard the results from the recall election held to vote out the entire board. Perfect. I love that. Johnny says there's a reason why Democrats keep winning, rigged voting machines. Urban says, haha, just like the song, try that in a small town. Exactly. But that's how you do it. That's how you do it if you're going to do it. Johnny says, don't believe me, watch the documentary 2000 Mules. Fluke Man says, battery-powered cars more likely to explode. And Dilo says, you got that right, Urban. Okay. The thing is, though, okay, 2,300 temporary jobs to build a factory and an investment of tax dollars that the people in that town are never going to see. And the town will sell you out for that. Town councils and other governing voting bodies will sell you out. Look at King of the Hill when Hank Hill got on the town council because they had made a law about the flush valves on toilets, and the toilets weren't working properly, but they were invested in it. They were getting a kickback. You know, the guy who was in charge of the idea, I think he was profiting from it through his plumbing company or something. That's how it works. These people saw the dollar signs, but all money isn't good money, and the town realize that we're fine. We don't need 2,300 extra jobs. We don't need an investment of tax money. We don't need things getting squirrely here, and we don't trust a Chinese company. Don't do it. And the town council did it, and they got rid of them. And I like that. I like that. Monkey says if that happened to find out a Chinese mainland company is building in Michigan, imagine how many are in California since the governor there went to China and thinks China is pro-grain. Yeah, no kidding. They're one of the worst polluters on the planet. Sven says most of those jobs were over 2,000 Chinese workers. Just something I heard listening at the township. I could be wrong. I didn't hear that, but that is interesting if that's true. Helter says, I would describe these Americans as impassioned, not crazy. They realize what the Chinese intentions are, and they don't want that going on in their area. Sven, catching up with you there really quickly on what you said about the Chinese workers coming in to do the work. which is possible. When I worked for Frito-Lay and they replaced us with robots and laid a bunch of us off, the robots, I want to say, were manufactured in Norway, the packing machines, and their team came and installed it, and their team instructed the existing mechanics and maintenance staff how to service the machines. It was manufactured overseas, brought here by their crew, and installed and regulated. And, you know, they left after the fact, but our people didn't do the work. So that's possible. Dragon says, what's disappointing is to see how easy it has been for China to establish spheres of influence throughout North America. That's why Florida passed that bill to make it so that Chinese companies could no longer purchase swaths of land out there. Nature Nerd says a lot of cities should vote out their whole board and government. And that's the whole point. Delo says, wake up or go broke. Or yeah, go woke, go broke. That's how it should work. These people should be afraid that, hey, if I screw over my constituents, I could lose my job. But too many of them, especially as you get into bigger government and larger jobs like senators, representatives, mayors, governors, people on the White House staff, including the president, get this air of arrogance about them that they're untouchable. So they don't care. And truth be told, they get voted in over and over and over again, and you end up with people like Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi and who is it, Waters. You can't get rid of them. Fluke Man says small towns are tight-knit group and more likely to get suspicious of strangers than large cities. And Gary says McDonald's shake machines are programmed to fail in franchise stores repeatedly. And Bingo says, I shared with you before, my school board is all Democrats. One of the first things they did was make the meetings closed to the public. They have a Zoom meeting, but they don't answer any questions. That's ridiculous. Yeah, that's unacceptable. Gary says, school boards can't clown around with adults in the room. No, but they still ignore them. And Urban says, here in British Columbia, we're in a post-colonial Chinese denouncement stage. Don't even try to pronounce it. And Bingo says, or pocket school board money. Yeah. But that's how you do it, folks. And I'm glad to see that. I wanted to share that one today as we move along through the news of the day. And this one is from the New York Post, and it calls out former President Obama. It says, a death the media will bury, Obama's dirty hands, and other commentary. I just thought this was an interesting article. I did read part of this one. Paul Kessler went to a demonstration seeking to exercise his God-given constitutionally protected rights to assemble and speak. And somebody on the other side felt entitled to knock him around and ended up killing him. And it says, he writes of the National Review's Jim Geraghty, of the California man, 69 years old, who was dead after attending a pro-Israel rally. This should horrify and outrage us. Kessler was no threat to anyone, and he did nothing wrong. That could have happened to any of us, and if newsrooms wanted to make the name Paul Kessler famous, they could. He could be depicted as a martyr to free speech and the First Amendment, but it's unlikely, as the angry young folks denouncing Israel are usually young progressives, and the middle-aged liberals who largely populate those news institutions are really uncomfortable confronting those on the left. A new report by the Network Contingent Research Institute offers a clearer picture of the financial forces possibly fueling anti-Semitism on college campuses. Now, this is where I think this starts to get interesting. Reports the Free Press, Bari Weiss, at least 200 schools, and they're talking about colleges and universities in the United States. At least 200 schools illegally withheld information on $13 billion in contributions from foreign regimes, many authoritarian, and the number of reported anti-Semitic incidents on a given campus has a meaningful relationship to whether that university has received funding from regimes or entities tied to regimes in the Middle East. And this may explain why university presidents whose main job is fundraising have been slow to respond to the October 7th massacre or released weak statements. After all, it's hard to believe these countries gave 9 and 10 figure gifts expecting nothing in return. Now, we've kind of already talked about this. We talked about the universities a couple of weeks ago because during the Trump administration, he was investigating these colleges and universities already. And at that time, it was $8 billion when he was still president. $8 billion that these 200 plus colleges and universities had received in donations, no strings attached, apparently, from the Middle East and from other places that they shouldn't be getting money from. And they hid it. They withheld who was making the donations. And that's why these universities and colleges were being investigated under the Trump administration. When Biden took office, he shut that off. He put an end to it. Now it's up to $13 billion plus. And the universities where you're seeing all these pro-Palestinian rallies are universities, and this is what they're tying together in this article, are universities that took money from the Middle East. And as the old adage goes, follow the money, folks. Follow the money. Gary says too many victories gets parents labeled as domestic terrorists. Yeah, that's scary too. They can do that to you now. Nature Nerd says Mexico and South America protectionist policies may stop Chinese sphere of influence there. Yeah, they're passing them along to us anyway. Remember, in the last couple of months, more than 24,000 mainland Chinese immigrants have crossed our southern border that we know of. And that's more in 2 months than we've had cross the border in nearly 20 years coming from China. It makes no sense. So something weird going on. And they've probably been released into the mainland U.S. and they're God knows where doing God knows what. Urban says Kessler's friend who witnessed the events preceding the incident has given a full statement. The suspect was aggressing on the pro-Israel group the day before and kept it up until Kessler fell. But there's a couple of great points that are made in this article. One, that, yeah, I mean, if this had been anybody else, if this had been a black man, just throwing that out there, it would make international news. But he's white, and so nobody cares. Or the media doesn't anyways. And then again, the tie-in, and this is very important, and this is why I brought it up a few weeks ago, that the universities and the colleges where these protests are happening are universities and colleges that have taken money and hidden it, withheld information on where that money came from in donations from the Middle East and from other adjutants. And those are the universities that are causing the problems. No strings attached. I think there's a lot of strings attached. I think there's many strings attached to that. And that's scary. Again, follow the money. Gary says slow invasion through illegal immigration. It's been going on in the Western world for years now. It really, really jumped off since Biden took office. That's obvious. And then, of course, it's been going on in Europe on the heavy end since 2015. And they're already here. They're among us. It's like They Live. If you're familiar with the film, I'm sure many of you probably are, with Roddy Piper, probably his best movie. They're already here. They're already freaking here. And if they want to cause problems now, they can. They can. But these colleges and these universities have sold out their integrity. They've sold their integrity to the highest bidder. There's no morals. There's no ethics. Their kids are brainwashed. They went there for higher education. They end up mired in social politics, perverting young minds for donations, for money. Gary says corporate-owned mainstream media is the way the deep state gatekeeps the truth. As we move along here. And speaking of government corruption, this is a good one. There's another article flying under the radar here. Just something to let you know that, yes, you should always question authority, and you should always be leery of law enforcement at all levels. NBC News, ex-CIA officer pleads guilty to drugging and sexually abusing women. 24 that they know of, that he's admitted to, at least, and not just in the United States. It's something he routinely did. This is we're supposed to trust these people? This is the guy that got caught at the risk of really getting in trouble on ScrewTube. Former CIA agent pleaded guilty Tuesday to drugging and sexually abusing at least 24 women in multiple countries, federal prosecutors said. Brian Jeffrey Raymond from La Mesa, California, took hundreds of videos and photographs of naked, unconscious women dating back to 2006, in various countries where he was stationed, according to officials. Former CIA agent 47 drugged and sexually assaulted several women between 2006 and 2020. He also photographed or video recorded at least 28 of them, nude or partially nude, as victims. So it's a lot. They could only get him for 24, basically, is what they're suggesting here. He was arrested in Mexico City, where he had been stationed in 2020 after a woman he met on the dating app Tinder was found screaming for help from his balcony, causing a neighbor to call the police, according to court documents. Raymond has been described in federal court documents as an experienced sexual predator. Prosecutors have said that in Mexico City, he would meet victims on dating apps and invite them back to his apartment for drinks. During the investigation, the FBI set up a website seeking more potential victims. Raymond traveled extensively, both for work and leisure, the agency said. He worked at the American Embassy in Mexico City from August 2018 until May of 2020. Raymond pleaded guilty, blah, blah, blah. Let me see. Sexual abuse, abusive sexual contact, coercion, enticement, transportation of obscene material, according to court documents. And his sentence will be somewhere between 24 to 30 years in prison, according to the Attorney General's office. And again, I always think that this is the guy who got caught. This is a person who's way up there, or was, in the CIA, working at embassies. And we're supposed to trust these people, are protecting our best interests, are watching out for us, are keeping us safe. Wouldn't take advantage of us, wouldn't lie to us, wouldn't hurt us. Wouldn't hurt us. Now let me see here as I catch up a couple more comments. Fluke Man says, which decade would you say was the best politically wise and why? Probably the 80s. Everything seems like it was better in the 80s. You know, it just better opportunities, more money. Government looking out. Reagan, again. The last time I remember the IRS being expressly targeted by a president was Ronald Reagan. And he was the one that warned about big government. He didn't like it. Gary says the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Helta says the CIA would have taken care of this in-house, and he'd just mysteriously have died on a secret mission. Got to keep the alphabet agencies looking clean, I guess, ? No kidding. Sven says, I have nothing constructive to say about that. You can't. There's nothing there. Urban says, after an ex-CIA agent stole the name of the painter Bob Ross, I'll believe anything about members of that organization. Gary says, didn't Bill Cosby play a secret agent on the I Spy TV show? Yes, he did. But that was acting. Urban says, 80s hands down. Bingo says, the Chinese claim they are coming for religious persecution. Then when they do they have private churches and they do not worship in established churches? ? That's because they hold their services in in Cantonese or Mandarin. They don't do the services in English. So they usually split the church. So they'll have like, what I've seen when they have something like that is it'll be like regular services, and later on in the afternoon, then it'll be the Chinese church. But again, it's because it's done in the Chinese language. And that's why they do that. And Johnny says 80s. He believes in the 80s also. 80s from my perspective growing up, it's probably the best decade that I've experienced. Now, here's an idea. And this is coming out of, who is doing this? Florida, I want to say. Is it Florida? I'm going to pull up the article here. Stupidest idea I've ever heard of. Stupidest idea I've ever heard of. And I'll tell you why when I get going here. This is another one from the New York Post. Teachers will now be able to live and work under one roof at school. Ah, brilliant. Miami's Bricknell neighborhood is about to witness an education revolution like no other. A groundbreaking project is underway, seamlessly blending education with affordable housing for teachers. This visionary venture by Miami-Dade County Public Schools promises to be a shining beacon of hope for future redevelopment projects across the nation. So it's a pilot. Raul Perez, the chief facilities design and construction officer for Miami-Dade County Public Schools, is the brain behind this project. He tells Local 10, what you are looking at here is a very unique collaboration between Miami-Dade County Public Housing and Community Development and the school district. A vacant piece of prime property has been transformed into a haven for education and housing. The development, estimated to be in the multi-million-dollar range, serves a triple-purpose mission. Problem number one, it's going to cost more than just millions. It's going to cost an insane amount of money, and your tax dollars are going to pay for it. That's problem number one. Problem number two, you are a fool if you're bringing your work home with you. You want the teachers to live in the school so that they can have quote unquote affordable housing, as if teachers can't afford to live somewhere anyway. Teachers are not paid as badly as they claim. Okay? They're really not, especially in public school. Let me catch up a couple of comments here. Oh, man. Semper Fi says, hello, just back from North Carolina vacation. Glad you could make it today. Crap weather of Western New York. He's back to Western New York. And Sven says, did the Pope give them that idea? Yeah, really. Tyrannicide says they're trying to grape your children. Oh. Dragon says, workforce housing is quite literally a fancy, trendy term to describe slavery. The fact that we have need to turn to companies to provide basic necessities is disturbing. Yes, it is. Monkey says, yes, make my workplace my home. Reminds me of an episode of SpongeBob where he literally moved his home into Krusty Krab. And then Urban says, leftist teachers living under one roof together sounds like the foundation of a cult compound. Indeed. It's a mistake. This is why, part of the reason why kids have always felt so crushed in public school, and that's part of the homework. You need to be able to leave it somewhere. For a child, going to school is their job. They hate it. It's miserable. Okay, I hated school. I've never really talked to anyone who enjoyed their public school experience. Okay, there's some people, I'm sure, but maybe if they were the captain of the football team or something like that, but that's what they enjoyed. Most people I've ever spoken to, as far as I know, they've never really enjoyed their public school experience, period. And then you bring, it's bad enough you're there all day. Then you got to bring the work home with you. How miserable is that for that child? Do you not remember what that was like when you were a kid? It's oppression. And you want them to live in that building? You want them to live in that building. It's a terrible idea. Plus, it's going to be supplemented by taxpayers. So it's going to be a burden on the community. Helter says the start of company towns, no teacher in their right mind would work where they sleep. It's insane that even is even seen as a viable alternative nowadays. No kidding. Gary says teachers living in schools makes the good teachers obey the liberal agenda. Plus, they're more easily distant, or they're more easily distanced from the community. Good point. Good point. And Paul says, so if they lose their job, they lose their house as well. Yeah, all the more reason to shut up and toe the line, because you will be out on your ass if you're not working here. You'll lose your home as well as your job. Exactly. It's a way to hem them up, to cast that net even deeper. But we are at the top of the hour, so I will go ahead and start wrapping things up. Again, this is Coffee Talk, or at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube if you're looking for me there, as well as Prepper University, or at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, and lest we forget, Fistful of Radio. That is fistfulofradio.com. Podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. So I will go ahead and wrap things up. I hope you all got something out of the conversation today. Glad you could join us, and we will do this again tomorrow.